Hello everyone, welcome to the Colombo JavaScript Meetup online session. So this is going to be our second online session due to the pandemic. So we used to have physical meetups, but let's be real with the current status and let's go with online and share your knowledge and explore the possibilities. So that's Justine. She's going to be our resource person and speaker for this session. So she's going to be talking about approaching the design as a developer. So from a developer point of view, we don't like, or we have some regrets about design. So let's see how we can gain knowledge and make sure that we love the design and learn new things and explore the possibility. So Justine is actually originally from Philippines. She learned there and she worked there also, and later she's joined to Shopify. I think most of you heard about Shopify, and she's a product designer there. As I go through her blog, I saw that she became a designer after she joined the company and she had to learn the design. I hope I'm correct. And she's going to talk about the design and about how we can actually approach a design from a developer point of view. And she also done kind of development. And this, rather than me introducing her, I will let her to join the session and give you the idea. And okay, Justine, start it. I will going to spot you now. Yeah.
Having me, everyone. Thanks for having me again this evening. It's morning here in Canada, so really pleased that your community is doing this and still continuing learning, and thanks for having me. So from what Chatu said, a little bit of background for myself. I actually started my career as a front-end developer because I really felt like developers are the coolest people in tech. And so I wanted to be like a code ninja and those bunch of stuff. But then in my first job, it was a tech agency. And then there was a need for design work eventually. And me knowing that I had like some skills on Photoshop, I actually like poster making contests back in high school. So I kind of, take on the design project and then later on learn about what design is. But at the time, design was really kind of young. So the concept of design is really more on the visual sides, the pixels, the layout, not really much about the user experience, about the research, about the users. And so I work on the project, but I was intrigued what design is. And so I started reading resources online from Medium, connecting to designers from Silicon Valley. And then later on, I found out that there's such word or such thing as user experience or UX. And I discovered that, holy shit, there's so many things going on with this design. It's not just how things look like. There's so many things. And I found out about the design process, fell in love with it. And I really love the idea of the design process of what you're doing for your users, making sure that they could use your product and it makes them productive. And so I pursued design and end up doing product design in Shopify. So like fast forward 5 years later, I'm now working in Shopify. But still, I do code in the sides, doing UI development, mainly POG and SAS, or your HTML and CSS, and some jQuery. So as you can hear from the story, I transitioned from development and then to design. And this topic that I'm going to share to you is very close to my heart because I've seen the challenges of collaboration between these two people. And hopefully this will shed some light on how developers could approach design and what are some ways that they could effectively work with their designers and maybe some ways if they don't have one. So let's get started. Okay. So I'm going to cover 4 topics tonight, but I have first things first, I would want you to grab a pen and paper because I'm going to have some questions along the way. And yeah, I'm going to give you 1 minute to just grab pen and paper that's closest to you. And I can see your face. I'll try to figure out how to do this. Maybe if someone can chat that their pen and paper is ready.
Yeah. I got my papers and pen ready, and I
Perfect.
had it very closer to me.
And can some of you just type in the chat how many of you have dedicated designers in your team or project? Just want to get a pulse.
So we are getting a few replies that they are ready.
Oh, perfect. And how many of you guys or you girls have dedicated designers in your project or your team? Graphic designers. Wow, that's one designer for the entire team or project? Oh, that's nice. So some of you do have like an idea of how to work with designers, or at least like seeing their process from afar, or maybe very close. So let's get started. The four topics are: first, what is design? What makes a good UX? How do I work with designers? What if we don't have designers? What can I do? How do I get started? Third is, how do I contribute to design? And fourth, how to level up my design knowledge. So Don Norman is the author of The Design of Everyday Things, and he kind of captured here what design should be. Beauty and brains, pleasure and usability, they should go hand in hand. So from here, you can say that design is not just how something looks, but also how something operates if it's useful to the users. So what is design? What makes a UX good? In my opinion, design is how a user experiences your product. So experiences is how it makes them feel when they use your product. Meaning it could be affected by so many things, just how something looks, how something functions, what are the features there, does it empower them, does it not, things like that. And in order for you to build like a good UX, these three things has to be true: efficiency, understandability, and delightfulness. So when you talk about efficiency, you're saying that users are able to fulfill the task in the least amount of time possible. We all agree that saving time is sexy. You have to help users to accomplish their task without friction and unnecessary steps. Notice how we have things like scanning credit cards to capture data instead of letting users type manually every time they place an order. We also have like ability to reuse information for the next purchase, or reusing like information from their profile if you have like a profile page. We also have things like very subtle things like having a .com in our keyboard, or having HTTPS to type an URL. These things strive for efficiency because product designers or even businesses know that making things quicker and more efficient for users are also equate to positive business. So less steps, quicker purchase. But there's one thing there's a loophole here. We don't simplify things just for the sake of simplifying. There's a fine line between oversimplifying and just simplifying in the most optimized level. Because if you try to simplify things so much that you kind of cramp everything in one screen for the sake of one step, it also means sometimes that people are not able to understand what's going on and not able to finish the task at hand. So again, there's a fine balance with efficiency and time and the information that you present in your screen. Next would be understandability. Design bridges complexity to meaning. So meaning, how do we make something so complex in the backend seem very simple and easy to use in the front? Like, it's a very hard task. I know developers, you know how things are connected. Like, I've talked to developers, they're like, oh, it's so tricky how things are going on. Like, there's so many things going on, so many things that are connected. But how in design can you make it seem like you only need to kind of do one simple task and then you're done? Like, how do you make sure that what you present to your users actually match the user's mental model? So for example, if you have like a data table and you present information, how can you match if your users are like kids or like very old people? How do you match your communication style your choice of words to match their mental model and be able to understand what's going on and then do something after getting that information. They should be able to move on to the next step that you want them to be. Otherwise, if they're stuck in that situation, they don't know what to do, it means that something wrong is going on, and you have to go back to your drawing board and figure out what you can improve on. And then third would be delightfulness. So users enjoy using your product. They don't only use it because it gets things done, but at the same time, they actually enjoy using it. So take, for example, your t-shirt. Like you have a t-shirt that, okay, it's okay, I can wear it. There's no holes. It's comfortable. But notice how you have like a favorite t-shirt that has something in it, like a print, maybe just a simple print, but like, or maybe like a crazy print that you really like. And you keep using it because you actually enjoy how it makes you feel when you wear that shirt. So it's almost like the same as a product. We all know that there's a lot of booking platforms everywhere. Like there's a lot of delivery options everywhere. But sometimes the only difference is really how it makes you feel. And it could be like multiple factors again. Maybe the speed, maybe how you connect to the brand, or even how it looks like, the subtle animations that you experience while you click something that brings you joy. So there's actually like something called a principal aesthetic usability effect, in which it says users often perceive aesthetically pleasing design as more usable. So if you have like two products that do exactly the same, but the other one looks more beautiful, they perceive it as more usable and user-friendly. So like I said, you have the pen and paper. That's why we have these questions here. I would like you to think about this question here. What product first comes to mind when you think about good UX? You can use your paper and pen to write down your answer. I'm gonna give you like maybe 30 seconds to answer the question. It's so weird not hearing people, to be honest. All right. So I want you all at the same time, type in the chat box what you think the product is. Like right now. Let's try it. Oh, anything from Apple. I agree. I really like their principles. Gmail. A pen. Netflix. Very interesting how Netflix does their usability test. Like they're very specific if they do A/B tests. Like for example, like your thumbnails, they have like user categories, and then for example, they categorize me into bucket A. They would test if this thumbnail A, thumbnail B does better for me, and then they would like show those kind of thumbnails in users like me to make it more appealing to watch. Shopify. Yeah. When I started joining Shopify, I thought it was such a simple product. When I discovered about the complexities in the backend, it's crazy. It's mind-blowing, guys. Yeah. All right. Airbnb. I agree. Let's move on. So now that you know what a good UX looks like, you have here your examples. The next question be, how do I work with designers so we could accomplish something similar to these businesses that I admire, or like these products that I admire? And what can I do if we don't have one? So there are two scenarios. The first one is the most ideal. We have a design team, lucky you. It's very easy. You just have to discuss and collaborate with them in all the stages of the product. But there's the second scenario, which is like the least ideal, which is you don't have any designer, or if you have a designer in your company, you don't have a dedicated one in your team or your project, but there's still hope. You can actually leverage what you have. So let's talk about the first scenario if you have a design team. Again, this is very ideal, but first things first, you should have some sort of camaraderie with your design team, meaning there's actually friendship and trust to begin with. So how could you build friendship and trust, or even a relationship with your design team? So first things first, You have to learn about their process. Every design teams operate in different ways. We have our different frameworks. Like, we have our different structures. So every design team is unique. So how are they unique and how do they operate within their team? You have to learn about their process. How do they kickstart the project? How do they explore? How do they come up with solutions? And then figure out what tools do they use to collaborate. Do they use Sketch? Do they use Figma? Where do they put their ideas on? Is it in Google Docs? Do they have a shared file of some sort? Know these things. And then also, like, how do they mark their design files? So how do they name things? How can you tell that this is like almost ready to ship? If it's high confidence, if it's still very rough, how do you actually do it in your team? You have to figure these things out because it's going to be more efficient and more smooth when you work with them. So let's talk about the first scenario here, or the first example, or the first way to work with your designers. First is exploring solutions together with your users in mind, while understanding possibilities and better alternatives. So again, in an ideal scenario, what happens is during your project kickoff or after your project kickoff, you actually have like a brainstorming session or a whiteboarding session with the entire team, like whoever is going to be involved in that team or in that project. You have like a brainstorming session, and then you start sketching some good ideas that you have. And so because it's diverse, all of your ideas are very diverse, very rich with, like, from a developer standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a researcher's standpoint. And then when you bring together all your ideas, you kind of note and vote which ones are the most compelling ones. Then once you voted them, the designers will take them in and then explore on their own, maybe with like continuing researching, talking to business people about it, and then doing their wireframes and user flows. And then what happens next is once they have like a very good solid idea or explorations, they come to you developers and then they present their idea to you. So they usually talk it through, like, so I'm thinking we begin with the login screen, and then after that they have this huge form or maybe a small form that they could fill up, and then the flow continues. This is very important, guys, because in this early exploration, you can actually inform how we think. So for example, we are thinking of, oh, we're going to get information from user using 3 drop-downs because we're thinking of narrowing down options until we get the information that we want from the user. But sometimes you developers have better ideas on how to implement this one, like in a more simplified manner. So you can say something like, oh, instead of 3 drop-downs, how about we can use this native component that maybe Apple just released, or maybe like the web just released, or something that we already are using in another part of our app. We use this instead, and then explain the pros and cons. Like, instead of using 3 drop-downs, we could capture this in a 3-wheel drop-down, or like we could like have a rich filter or search feature that we could use instead of just the 3 drop-downs. And that way, we could like think of other options and possibilities in the front end, and also like how things are implemented. That it's very, very helpful for us. Second would be describing how things work in the backend and how others have solved a similar solution or challenge. So it allows us to think of better solutions when we know how things are actually working in the backend and why they don't. I know there are times when developers would say, oh, we can't do that, we have this limitation, or it's not feasible, there's no technology yet. It really pays off if you tell us why it doesn't work and what can be done instead. So for example, when I really like the scenario when you say like, oh, when we do this though, it can trigger something else in the app that sometimes the users might not expect. And so how about we do this instead, so that we don't have to like automatically do things for them, and that way it's more expected for them that these things would happen. So what I'm saying is sometimes we don't really know how things are affected in the backend or how they kind of affect each other. So sometimes when you bring up these things, we'll be able to tell like, oh shit, this is not a good idea. Maybe we should do something else instead, so we won't trigger that from happening. And then now we will also avoid like weird edge cases for our users. Again, whenever you think with designers, you always think about the users at this point. You don't think about anything else. Like imagine if they experience this, Would it be ideal for them? Would it be like a lot of friction for them? And it's your job as a developer to also figure out how to make it a very smooth experience for your users. So the third one would be bringing up weird edge cases and difference in cross-platform implementation if there are. So what happens is designers usually come up with the most ideal happy path or the most ideal journey. We usually put aside all the edge cases or the things that would trigger errors at the end. And it's very important for us to actually know them and anticipate them so we could decide like if we still want the happy path or there might be a better approach. So at the same time, there's also like scenarios where the design really works in desktop, but once you implement it in mobile, it breaks. So you also have to like maybe bring that up if you think that it's gonna cause some problems in mobile. That way we could always anticipate these things, if that makes sense. So now let's jump in no, there's a question. Was there a moment when you shared something and that changed how a designer approached the problem? I'm gonna give you like a minute or two to think about if there is that scenario or you've happened to experience that one. Also, please tell me if I'm going way too fast or speaking way too fast. All right, I want you to think about that moment and maybe write them down. And then if someone is confident, you can share it in the chat as well. I would love to hear those stories. It's almost like an aha moment for us. How about you, Chatu? Have you experienced something before? Oh, can't hear anyone. Oh. So Vishnu says it's when me and my team sent back PSD design to the designer since it's impossible to do on the front end side. Yeah, sometimes that happens, or like you tell them like this is impossible. What did they say? Did they say like why, or did they just accept that it's not doable?
Okay, I got my internet connection issue and I'm back.
Oh, all right, I did lost you. The design was simplified. Okay. So a little bit of secret, actually, like whenever devs tell us like this is impossible, it's very nice if you can get to explain why. That way we could figure out how to properly change the design, because it's kind of hard just to tell like it's impossible. You have to describe why. That way we could avoid them from the equation and then approach it in a different way. So Udaya shares when there is, sorry if I'm pronouncing your word incorrectly, when there is a technical challenge that we cannot approach the exact same thing the designer gave. Okay. I'm gonna move on to the next topic. So what if you don't have designers? I bet some of you here don't have dedicated designers. That's okay. There's still hope. You can actually take advantage of what you have right now. So the first steps that you can do first is always have your users in mind. Really, the heavy work of designers is removing themselves from their work and really thinking about what would be the ideal experience if they were the user. And it takes a lot of practice to. I remember when I was starting in design, I was like a newbie designer. I always thought that what works for me would work for different people, because it's very obvious. Like, it's very easy for you to say that that's really obvious, because you're tech savvy. We're all tech savvy individuals. We maybe have a different words that we know that users might not know. So we always have to put ourselves in their shoes. And once we're able to do that and be constantly aware that we're designing for them, then it's kind of almost like easy to navigate through design, because that's really what design is thinking about your users. And so once you have your users in mind, you think of an ideal experience or flow if you were them. So I know developers, you have your user flows, with the boxes that you have with the arrows. It's very similar with design. We also have something similar, but we usually use pen and paper to draw things. The only difference is it's really like the user is at the center of it all, and not how things work in the back end. You have to remove yourself, like, even though you know it's not feasible or you don't have any technologies yet, remove that mentality and just think about what would be the ideal scenario. Second would be get only good and applicable ideas from competitors or similar industries. So now, for example, you have like an idea of like a booking app, and you really like, you have this in your flow that you decide in the first bullet point, you have like somewhere where you find homes or like search a home. Think of what company or what product does this really well. Look at their website or their product and see how they do it, and then try to just get inspiration from them, or even like steal like good ideas from them, and see how that like fits in to your problem. And if that fits in, then you can for sure get it and then use it in your product. Again, this is not a bad, like, it's not a bad way or process. We actually have something called competitive analysis. It's a very fancy way of just saying we're going to look at other people's work and steal ideas from them. Like, we really have that process where you say, oh, I'm going to do a competitive analysis of another company, but in reality, you're just getting good ideas from them and seeing if you can reuse some of their good ideas. So don't worry about it. It actually exists. Third would be leveraging existing UI kits like Bootstrap and Foundation. So if you're a developer, you think that you're not really strong with the visual side of things, it's okay. Like, there's tons of resources out there. There are UI kits, there are frameworks like Bootstrap, Foundation. I've used a bunch of them before when I was like starting. We don't have resources for designers, but we do have a grasp of what an ideal flow is. We actually did these things in the past, so that's okay. As long as you're thinking about the users first, like their experience, and then take advantage of this existing resources, that would put you in the right spot. Okay, so another question. What would you like to start doing or doing more of in your team? Again, you can just write it down on pen and paper. Also, if you want to share, you can share it in the chat. That's true. Usability testing. Design sprints. Oh, someone knows design sprints here. Dribble. I really like Dribble when it was like just starting off, because you really see like the work in progress. Right now, though, it's more like, we call this saturated with visual designs, which is still really good because you can see like how you can play with the visuals. But you also have to be careful because some of them are not actually usable, which is why like someone here actually said usability test, because even though like the design really looks really good, when you look at it in your screen, it's so jarring that you can't almost use the product. So it's very important for you to like get ideas and also test them, which I think are here in the chat. Behance for inspiration, proper design versioning. Yes, amen. A/B testing. This is great, you guys. All right, I'm gonna continue. So I mentioned to you some ways to contribute, some ways to kind of collaborate with your designers, and some ways as well if you don't have one. But there are actually existing ways you can already contribute to design. And you might be surprised, like, what? I do have contributions? Yes, you do have, sir and ma'am. And these are the things that you can contribute to design right now. First would be speed and perceived performance. So sometimes there's a lot of things going on in the back end. Like the query time is actually 5 seconds or even 10 seconds sometimes. You can improve, instead of the speed, just the speed, you can also improve perceived performance. So when you say perceived performance, it's how you measure how fast a user thinks your website is, not necessarily how fast your technical stats are. So it might be, like, in reality it's slow, but how the users perceive it, you can actually make a ton of things to make it like seem like it's still quick and fast. So for example, we have progress indicators, we have lazy loading, we have preloaded content. In my website, I use something like from blurred to pixelated to sharp images to make it seem like it's fast, even though it's a things are heavy in the back end. There's also desktop and mobile responsiveness. Like, I know it's a huge deal that we make our website or our product responsive. Like, for example, in desktop you have 3 cards, but in mobile you can really fit in 1 card. So it's like, it's still usable and it's still digestible. You can still comprehend it quite easily. But there are things like, for example, in mobile, we have bigger fonts instead, because in mobile you have a smaller screen, so you have to have bigger fonts. We also have like things like correctly labeled components for accessibility. Like, I know some designers, we don't really think about accessibility that much because we're like looking at the visual side of things, but you as a developer, you can actually be an advocate of accessibility and then advising us what to do in order to make sure that people or our designs are inclusive overall. Third would be help designers think outside the box by showing what is possible in the front end. I kind of touched it in the earlier topic, but I really love this when developers introduce something new that I didn't know was possible. Or even like how things, like when I started joining Shopify, like I have little context on what's going on, like how other teams or projects are dealing with this kind of problem. Sometimes you have an idea and then you just have to bring it up. Like, how about we use this component instead? How about we implement it this way? We actually have a native component that can do the same thing. Things like that are really, really helpful. And the fourth would be app works the way it's expected to. Again, guys, design is about being useful to users. So to begin with, if you're doing a great job in making sure that there's like no bugs, everything is behaving the way they're expected to, when you press a button, something happens, you're already contributing to design. Because again, it's useless if you have a very good interface and a very good experience. When the user clicks it, nothing happens. Like, it returns them an error, or at some worst case scenarios, it doesn't even tell them what's going on. So if you're able to just like build things the way it should be, then you're helping us designers do our job as well. So see. So the question would be, can you recall a moment when you actually contributed to design? Maybe it could be something that I mentioned before, or maybe it's something that I haven't mentioned. You can also like drop them in the chat box below. Yep, with design sprints. That's nice. I have a funny experience. Not a funny experience, but it was like a funny because it's fun, but it's not like not that funny like humorous. But it was like a very fun experience because prior joining to Shopify, I actually joined like a fintech company, and I started design sprints in our company, and we have so many developers. Like the ratio of designers to developers are so off that whenever I do design sprints, there are so many developers joining. The funny thing is when developers join, we kind of have groups, and then usually they come up with the best ideas. Like it's so good. Like I'm so impressed. Like they have like it's kind of a happy feeling for designers to see how developers think. Like they actually think about simplifying things, and surprisingly, they also think about the users. Before it was surprising, but now it's no longer surprising to me. Like I'm impressed. I have removed stack. Chatu says I have removed stack choices from pages when there is an error. I don't know what that is, but that sounds amazing. It's like when our designer was on leave. I'm not sure what this means. Okay. I'm going to continue to the last topic we have, how to level up my design knowledge. So what if you want to learn more about design, but where do I get started? What's the easiest? I don't want to know about like the very nitty-gritty design process. Like I want to start with something that I could relate to. Behold, the things that I actually recommend to you guys. I actually just added the third point, but there's so many nuggets of knowledge when you read Apple's human interface guidelines and Google's material design. Like they cover how things are named in the backend, like how components are named, so many dev-related stuff that also like mentions about design quite a lot. So I recommend you checking out these things. They also update their website like every year. So there are new things to kind of learn. So for example, in Apple's human interface guidelines, they mention about different things that they have in iOS. And then they say like launching, provide the launch screen. And then they actually take time describing why it's important. Like the function of a launch screen is to give people the impression that your app is fast and responsive while allowing initial content to load. So just looking at these resources, you can get tons of great advices from their designers. It's like talking to you, like their designers talking to you, and then also their developers because they have a ton of things going on here dev related. Like here you can see, I also talked briefly about this, about speed and perceived performance, and they mention it here. You can also like take advantage of the screen to make that brand connection with your users and things like that. For material design, it's also the same. Like they talk about different things that's going on with Google, and then they have like very good descriptions as to why it's important. For example, motions help orient users by showing how elements in a transition are related. And the reason why I really like these resources is because they actually work. Like we know users, they either have Android and iOS phones, and you know how great their experiences are on each on their own. And so just looking at these resources, you can do like how can I make my own product as good as Google's or Apple. These are really good resources. And the last but not the least, Laws of UX. They actually talk about so many principles about design that are like good starting points when you want to know why things should be. Like for example, they have like researches like productivity soars when a computer and its users interact at a space of 400 milliseconds, and then they have like research as to why that's the fact, and that's why we're kind of doing the same thing in design, why we're always striving for speed, because it ensures that neither has to wait in the other, and so there's like minimal user drop off, or users are most likely to finish the entire flow if it's not lagging or there's no friction. Again, I cannot emphasize more. This is a very good resource for you to read if you want to know more about the basic things that you should have at least in your interface to make sure that the perceived performance or the perceived design of your work is actually good to the users. And I'm gonna end it there. That's all, folks. Again, my name is Justine. I'm a product designer from Shopify. If you're interested of joining our company, we're still hiring. You can check out shopify.com/careers. Also, if you want to know more about our process, maybe we could you can reach out to me and then see if you're interested. there's so many open opportunities, and we're also like building things that are very timely right now, which like e-commerce, which is the future. So let me know. That's all. And I'll give the floor to Chatu. There are questions out there.
So now we can start the Q&A.
Okay.
And Justine, it was really great session, and the content is really good.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, it was kind of very knowledgeable for me also.
I like how you guys are
Okay, let's start.
joining the chat. Okay. Thank you.
So let's go with the questions. So you
All
can
right.
actually
Also feel free to be like very casual. I'm a very casual person.
So when you're developing a product, let's say you are developing to kind of a different audience, or like let's take about a Shopify shop. So you are going to start your own shop. So how you going to identify your audience or what the users are going to be?
How do
you know about your user?
How would you identify your users? Is that your question?
Or what they actually wants?
What they actually want. So
Yeah, just a question from me.
I have I have a follow-up question. Do you already have, is this product like an existing product or like a common product that we already have, or is it something truly new? Or are you more talking about
It's kind
creating
of
a
a new thing.
store? So usually when you create a product, there's a reason why you're building the product. So you can just say, oh, let's make like a game. You usually have like a reason, like a user in mind, like let's make a game for nerds or like for tabletop nerds. Or when you start an idea, like, oh, let's make like a booking for nomad travelers. So you usually have something like a person to go to, like, or markets to go to. And when you have the market to go to, you already have like a very, very, I would say like a very vague, like users in mind. What you can do is like look at the opportunities, who might they be? And then try to, like, if you have a UX researcher or a marketing person, they usually do user personas. So what user personas are, like, they represent your target user, if that makes sense. Let me, like, I would say like it's very rare for us to kind of create a problem without anyone in mind as a starting point. So you have to like figure out who you're building for, and then see where the opportunities are. Like who might these customers be? Like who are actually willing, if it's like a subscription product that you're thinking, who are actually willing to pay. And how could you get, who are those kind of users? Are they the users who are tech savvy or not? Are they like, do they belong in the older, like younger generations? Where are they coming from? Do you want to start your product in your region, or do you want to start somewhere else, or do you want it to be global right away? And that would suggest what kind of user you want to target. And it usually is like more aligned to what your business goals are, in order to identify who your target users are. So for example, in Shopify, our target users are people who actually want to be independent and not just list their stuff on Amazon. And so we would target SMEs or merchants who actually want independence or have their own store. So we would look for those opportunities, who these people are, and then interview them, get to know them more, who are the majority of these people, and then make the user persona based on those people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's kind of like to ask more and more questions about what are you building and what the people you're targeting. Then the more the question you get it, and it's going to be kind of clear. That's what you're going to do. So we also got another question. It's from Vishnu, I think.
Okay.
No, I will go from the beginning. So that's from Ashrat. So what advice would you give to someone starting with design?
I'm going to assume, Ashraf, are you a developer right now? Or where are you currently are? Because like how you get started in design is actually depends on where you currently are and where you're transitioning from. Oh, it's privately. Okay. So I would assume that you are a developer. If you're a developer, you could get started with, if you want to try with design, like, again, like I shared Apple Humans Interface Guidelines and Google Materials Design. You can start reading those things because they're more relatable to you as a developer, and see why are they giving these suggestions or these advices in their website, and try to come up with like a side project and apply your learnings from those resources. I would also try like design, like when you started with design, it's really more about the user flows, to be honest. Like I know some people, they get started with the visual side of things, but design is, it's really more about the experience. I would suggest try to create your user's flow based on your user standpoint, and try to put that more in practice and apply that to your craft, or even share that to your designer or your team and see how they respond. And it's almost like when people see how you affect the design overall or the product overall, if they see their impact, they would see you as they will see it as an opportunity for you to kind of become like more, I guess, more more about joining the design team, or like they'll probably more like consult you, and then that would help you kind of transition to design if you're interested in it. Does that answer the question?
Hopefully. I think he can answer it later.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next question.
Okay. I have a question here.
So this question is about user testing. How would you do user testing for a site like apple.com or New York Times?
All right. So this is a very tricky question. I'm not coming from a UX researcher background. I know they are more in depth towards this, but I would say research always starts with a goal in mind. Like, what do you want to know more? What are your burning questions that you want to find answers for? And then that's when you go to, for example, like a very good resource would be NN Group. I can show it to you guys in my screen. Let's see. NN Group. So you start with a question in mind, and then this is a very like helpful cheat sheet. So here's a very important part. So for example, you have a burning question. How many people would find this better than the other? Something like that. If you're comparing two things. So you can see here, how many people thinks this way? What do they say? You can either like figure out what do they say about this thing, or what do they actually do. So from here, if you wanted to say like how many people say that this is more better, then you can do a quantitative attitudinal research. So you fall in this quadrant, and then look for researches or research methods that actually are focused on quantitative attitudinal. So I think it's here, quantitative here, and attitudinal. So you can either do intercept surveys or email surveys, this kind of things. So really, I don't have a solid question. You have to begin with your goal and then figure out what research method works for you, and then do that method. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Justine. So the other question is, how often should developers sync with the designers? Since time is costly, what efficient process steps we can take to take like design sprints, another process, or any other tool to use?
Right, so design sprint is a very good tool if you want to just quickly prototype something and test it. I'm not sure if you're doing the 5-day design sprint, because that's different from just like a normal design workshop. But I would say early on in the process, once you're doing the project kickoff, you actually have to do like some sort of a session with your designers just to see where their mind's at, or like even like contribute if they have like a session in place. If they don't have, sometimes what they do is like work in their own like a silo, and then always make sure that once they have this high confidence ideas, you have sync with them, and then they talk to you about what they're thinking, and then that way you can like give your ideas as a developer. What are the possibilities? What could be the challenges? What could be the pros and cons and risk in this flow, in this flow, in this flow? I would say there's no rigid process. It's really more about talking and having a conversation with your designer in person or in call. Okay.
Cool. And another question is, design sprint are usually useful, but in practical scenarios, it is not part of the project. What do you suggest to get the design sprint to make more kind of practical?
It is not part of the project. What do you suggest?
I think it's a part of the project, right?
I think maybe like shortening, maybe I would say that design sprint is not the most practical, because you have to book everyone's time, and it's like 5 days that everyone has the time or that really availability. What you can do is divide it in chunks. So if you really want to do design sprint, do the day one first, and then maybe have like a 2-day gap, and then do the second day activity. And you know, you have to divide it like what works for your team to make it more like fit your schedule. If not, you have to look for another tool or another framework that you can use in order to ideate. So sometimes for me, I've done design sprints in the past. I don't follow the 5-day design sprint. It's impossible. What I do is like the 3-hour design sprint or the 2-hour design sprints. What I do is I have a goal in mind. What do I want to do at the end of the design sprint or the workshop? And then I find activities that I could take advantage of or use to come up with that goal. So for example, I really just need like a sketch and then a vote. And then at the beginning, maybe of the workshop, I have like a lot of experts who will share their ideas, and then let people sketch, and then we note and vote and share. Like things like that, you can just like pick and choose what works for you and your goal. You don't necessarily have to follow the entire 5 days. I would say, you know what? I'm gonna give you some resources after this. We could have a chat, so I could figure out more about your problem and I could help you. Does that work?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So we got a question that I think is more related to you. How the UX designers are different from product designer or product engineer?
I'm not sure what UX engineer is, but we do have UX developer in Shopify. So for UX developers, they're more concerned about how designs are implemented in the visual, like the front end, like what the users actually see. When you say like engineers as developers, but when you say UX engineer, I don't think it's really different. When you say product designers and UX engineer, I would say before, if you have like the UX and UI, when you say UX, it's more concerned about the user flows, the wireframes. And then the UI is more about the visual, like what buttons do we use, what color, how do we lay out things, what's the typography. It's really more like how something looks. UX would be something more like what the flows are. When you say product designers, it's really more about end-to-end. So you're thinking about the UX and the UI as well. I would say UX engineers are kind of the same. They're still thinking about the users and the experience. It's just a different term.
Yeah, so I think this question came because of some controversial things happened recently. So are there any intellectual property rights or patents that we might violate if we copy a design from someone else?
As far as I know, there is not. Like as long as it's something that's already out there, like especially if it's in Dribble or in like, you can really take advantage of them as like an inspiration. If you really copy them, again, I haven't heard of any news, Uber filing Grab or Grab filing someone else because like they're the same concept. Sometimes they look the same. Yeah, I don't think there's such thing. You won't be violating any, to be honest, if as far as I know, unless if they trademark it. But I think it's very rare for me to come across something like a design that's been trademarked or a product that's been trademarked or copyrighted.
Okay, so another question from Pupudu. If you are new, how to identify a good design? Good looking does not always mean good design, right?
Yeah, so that's like one of the points that I had in the earlier topic that I discussed. So as you can see here in this other slide, good UX is efficient. So it means you're able to empower your users to fulfill the task in the least amount of time possible. So you have to be able to simplify what's complex for them. It has to be understandable. It has to be clear what they have to do next. And the last would be delightful, which is like more like how something looks like or how they're able to connect the product with your brand. If they're able to already accomplish the task at hand, make them more productive, make them more efficient, empower them to do other tasks, not just spending time in your app figuring out how things work, then that's already good design. A more quantitative way to do this is when you see impact in your business. Like greater sales, greater conversion, those can be measured as well.
Okay, I think that answers the question. Cool. So yeah, we did good. We actually got very interactive session today. We got more questions than our previous sessions. It's very good. So do we have any other questions also? Okay, till the questions pop up, I will go another question from me. So how you identify a good suitable typography for your product?
Can you repeat your question?
How do you going to identify or choose a typography that is going to be suitable for your product?
Right. So so first things first, what's your brand like? So is your brand, which audience are your brand speaking to? Like what's the character of your product? Like is it geared more towards like people who are like hipstery, or it's more geared towards like people who are very I would say just like very classical, or just like normal, like they don't belong in any buckets. When you choose a typography, it's very important that the style of your typography fits into that users. Like if you're more appealing towards hipster, maybe you might choose like a typography that's more fun. But again, if you choose a typography, I think the important things would be readability and how the font weights, the variety of font weights, because you're going to use it when you're designing. So it's very important, at least for us designers, to have at least 4 to 5 font weights to choose from whenever we design, because we might need sunny bold, thin, normal. Of course, the clarity as well. Is it readable? Would it scale in bigger? Like if it's in a bigger type or font, will it still be readable? If it's in very small one, like 12 points, will it still be readable? And then you choose that. The typography, we have so many things that are available. I would say if you really don't know what to choose, see what is commonly used and start from that. And then start from what's commonly used, and also like what's free if you can buy your own font.
Yeah, that's great. And I think since we also passed about 1 hour now, and
Yes.
I think you joined very earlier to the session also, so I think it's trying to kind of go and wrap up the session. And if they have more questions, they will reach to you. And we also have a group, and I will edit you there. And okay, so previous time I actually messed up the ending because I forgot to unmute myself. So this time I'm going to make it very structured. Yeah. So I want to thank Justine. When I asked about shall we do a session in June, I think, yeah, in previous month, you said that she can do it one in July. So thank you very much accepting the invite and working on the content and make sure that this is going to reach here. And even you are in Canada and with the time differences and all stuff, thank you very much for allocating your morning to us in the weekend.
Yes. And if you have questions, again, reach out to me. I think some questions they deserve more robust answer. And I think it's gonna take me time to kind of flesh out your questions to give you the proper answers. So yeah, feel free to ping me or send me a message, and then I could like just have a conversation with you.
Great.
You're very welcome.
And I want to thank everybody who actually joined today as participants and asked the questions and make this very interactive one. I want to thank my whole community. And I want to thank Leafy Code for the Pupudu. They actually run a Facebook campaign to an event to get more kind of a coverage and let the more people know about that we are having the event. And from his company, they actually developed all the designs for the event. And thank you very much for that one. And I want to thank Odd0 and Ben, who is actually still, I think, online from Australia to giving the Odd0 Zoom account to make this very approachable one, and we can do the live stream into the Facebook also. I think I didn't forget anyone. Yeah, I didn't forget anyone. Yeah, that's it. And till next meetup, have a good experiences and build cool stuff, break the things, and share your knowledge in next one.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, have a nice day and
You
good night for
too.
our folks.
Good night.